Sheikh Asrar Rashid, it's great to be back here in Birmingham once again to meet you.
Welcome to you.
Oh, thank you very much. How are you doing? It's been about a year since I've seen you.
Very well. Been cleaning the streets,
Yes.
brushing away broken Birmingham Council. Many people don't realise the council is broken because of the 300 million that the Birmingham Council was sued for by the dinner ladies.
Yes, yes.
And now we have a broken council that can fund HMOs, drug addicts, to pile up into Birmingham, coming from all over the UK, as far as Newcastle, all the convicts entering Birmingham, living in Birmingham. We have shops open 24 hours selling gas canisters. So these are the social issues that we have. And today, of course, you've come to discuss another social issue.
No, I have. But it's been very good. I mean, obviously, I've been following you very closely on YouTube, and obviously, I know that you've been doing your bit, and you always speak out on very contentious issues. You're right. I have come here to Birmingham today to speak to you about a very important subject. We're going to talk today about Asian grooming gangs. Now, I've known you a long time. I've been friends with you a long time, and you know that I'm not coming here today as some type of superior white male, who's going to try and insinuate that all Muslims are,
you
are
can't
sex
do that.
offenders.
You're Irish. You can't do that.
I'm not going to try anyway. But I know the statistics. We've both read the statistics in preparation for this. I know that over 80% plus of sex offenders here in the UK are white. So it's not a question of saying that, you have a big problem in Islam with sex offenders. However, you do have a problem. There are a few rotten apples in your basket, and they have been there for quite a while, because this is not a new issue. It keeps coming up. It's almost generational at this stage. So I really am looking forward to hearing your views on this today. But before I ask you some questions, and I have only a few questions to ask you really, so it's kind of an open interview, I'm going to read out a statement to kind of put some context to what we will be discussing. Now, recent investigations, Azra, in the UK have exposed how grooming gangs were allowed to abuse vulnerable children for many years. Public institutions failed to act. Some authorities ignored clear evidence because they were scared of being called racist. This cowardice let the abuse continue. Now, in June this year, Baroness Louise Casey, her report came out into grooming gangs. This confirmed that many of the men involved were from South Asian backgrounds. Now, Dr. Taj Hargey from the Oxford Institute of British Islam, he went one step further. And he said, whilst he endorsed Baroness Casey's report, he says that it should have gone that step further. He said that most of the offenders, especially in places like Yorkshire and the Northwest, were Pakistani, whether they were born here in the UK or not, but more tellingly, most were Muslim. He said that political correctness, this is Dr. Taj Hargey, he said political correctness and a fear of being called racist stopped people from protecting children. That fear was put above the safety of thousands of girls who were sexually abused, mainly by Pakistani men in these grooming gangs. So my first question to you today, to open this up, is, as one of the top leading Muslim scholars here in the UK, what is your position on these grooming gangs and the evil men behind these crimes?
Well, what we do have is an institutional failure. They are correct to point out political correctness, and there should be more strict punishment. So those grooming gangs in that specific case in South Yorkshire, in Rochdale and Rotherham, they were arrested, but I believe the punishments, the legislation is weak. So from the time of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley in the 1960s, when capital punishment was finished just before their arrest, a year or two prior to their arrest, capital punishment was finished in this country. So strict punishments must be carried out against any rapist, any child abuser. person who rapes a child.
We'll come on to punishments a little bit later on, but I suppose first of all I want to know what's your views, because you must get fed up, because as I said, it's almost generational now. These grooming gangs, Asian grooming gangs, have been around for quite a while, 20, 30 more years.
Well, as I've stated, any grooming gang, whether Asian, Pakistani, whatever label you apply to them, must have strict punishments. And additionally, it's a failure, institutional failure, as well as a societal issue. Meaning, socially speaking, why are these children vulnerable in the first place? Meaning, there's a failure from the family nucleus, as well as why are these predators, these people who are preying on these young children, why are they able to do so?
Yeah, and today I really want to concentrate on the perpetrators rather than the victims, because you're absolutely right. There are other issues that we could discuss about the victims, but I don't want to do that today. I really do want to concentrate on the perpetrators, and particularly the Muslim perpetrators, without, as I said, not excluding the other 80%. But, I just want to find out a little bit more, because, I'm actually shocked, and maybe I'm naive, but when I still hear about these Muslims, Pakistani men, I'm a little bit shocked, because I expect real high integrity from Muslims. So when I see these things in the paper...
Labels as Muslims, they can be labeled as Muslims, but they are clearly living a hedonistic, nihilistic, capitalist way of life. Meaning a real Muslim would not be a nihilist, hedonistic person who just indulges to the point that the legality, the parameters of legality, the more you expand the parameters of legality of what is considered moral and immoral, people tend to gravitate towards that which is forbidden. So these people are clearly gravitating towards what is forbidden by law.
So what has gone wrong in the teachings? What has gone wrong with their moral compass in comparison to many, many others that would never ever go down that route?
These people are clearly hypocrites. They are what we refer to as munafiqeen. Munafiqeen are people who outwardly embody Islam, but inwardly they carry out those things which are antithetical to Islam. And child abuse, sexually abusing children or sexually abusing anyone, is one of those acts which is totally immoral and has strict punishment in Islam. So in these cases, there have been cases where some of the groomers, some of the abusers have attempted to utilize their religion, Islam in this case, to validate their actions or validate some aspects of what they claim to with regard to their rights. But that is a hypocritical usage of Islam. Hypocritical because they know very clearly that if they were under Sharia law, they would be executed. Under Sharia law in Islamic countries, in many countries, they would be executed.
That might be the case, but obviously we haven't Sharia law here, and obviously whatever punishments we have here in this country,
but the
namely
point is,
imprisonment, it's not a deterrent, is it?
The point is them misusing Islam when they clearly know that Islam prohibits these type of acts to the point of death.
Yeah. But do you think that these grooming gangs have seriously damaged the integrity and the reputation, the fine reputation of Islam?
I think corporate media and politicians also have a hand in attempting to tarnish the image of Islam by utilizing such cases, associating criminal behavior with Islam. For instance, we have Caribbean youth carrying out stabbings. It's never labeled as Christian killing. The label Christian is never applied. Those black gangs are Christian, but it's called black and black crime, which is also an absurd label. But they will never label that as Christian gangs killing one another.
No, I do.
So the religion, the label of the religion being applied just because the men are Pakistani in this case, is a misapplication by the corporate media and by the right-wing media as well. You have all these channels that are geared in that way to apply the religious label. For instance, if you have mass killings of any group, the religion of the perpetrator is never mentioned. So Benjamin Netanyahu killing X number of thousand children in Gaza is never referred to as Jewish crimes against humanity. So similarly, when you have grooming gangs that happen to be Pakistani, to label it as Islam or Muslim is an unfair treatment of towards Islam. But as for the perpetrators, there should be strict punishments.
Well, in fairness to the media, I don't think the media have gone to town completely on Muslims and labelling it that
Certain newspapers have, like the Daily Telegraph,
because
or the
that
Daily
was
Mail.
part of the problem, that a lot of people were afraid of being called racist, were afraid of being called
well, Muslim is not
Islamophobia.
a Muslim is not an
being
ethnic
accused
group.
of.
Muslim is not an ethnic group. Within Britain,
No.
we have
Yeah.
thousands of indigenous English Muslims
Yeah.
who are disregarded
Yeah.
by the media. Meaning, Islam is not the religion of Pakistanis and Bengalis.
Do you accept that there are some, even if it's only a tiny percentage, that there are some bad apples in your basket?
Of course, there's no community that's free from any sin.
Yeah.
There's no community that does not have sinners.
And do you feel that these men have let down the fine reputation of Islam? Because you're a scholar. You travel around the country. You give speeches. You must be a little bit fed up of this problem with these grooming gangs that comes up time and time again, doesn't it?
Grooming gangs should not exist amongst Muslims. I believe that child abusers should not exist amongst Muslims. There should be no such thing as a child abuser amongst Muslims. And if there is, it should be dealt with appropriately, not only in the UK. You have cases of sexual abuse in madrasas in Pakistan, and physical abuse where children are beaten. That should be outlawed also in Pakistan. Sexual abuse occurs in Pakistani and South Asian madrasas, not because of Islam, because of the social nexus, the network of how schools are run in that country, similar to boarding schools in the UK. Historical cases of sexual abuse in the UK, boarding schools had cases of sexual abuse in the past and currently speaking. Similarly, in Pakistan, there are cases of sexual abuse, and that should not happen. They have a culture of what is known as bachabazi in parts of Pakistan, where grown men will accompany a young boy to abuse. This is known as bachabazi culture in North Pakistan, other parts of Pakistan also. So these type of cultural practices, I believe, tarnish the image of Islam, because those people happen to be Muslims, even though it could be referred to as a Central Asian and a South Asian problem. Sharia law is not actually applied in those countries. So crucifixion for rape, for instance, there was a case in Pakistan where a woman was raped at a petrol station many years ago during the rule of Imran Khan. He attempted to introduce the punishment of castrating, chemical castrating.
All right, yeah.
But the actual Islamic punishment is crucifixion. The rapist is crucified in public to make an example of him. Now, unless these strict punishments are not carried out, there will be a problem of rapists.
Yeah, but that's Pakistan. We're talking about the
But
UK.
these men have, some of them came from Pakistan. So
Yeah.
this is where we have the problem of mass immigration in this country also. Uncontrolled, unchecked immigration.
Do you think some of those values, some of those views are actually important? Because I want to come on to, I want to look at some of the reasons. I want to really examine some of the reasons why these grooming gangs come up time and time again.
I believe it's an amalgamation of both.
Hold on a second. Let's really try and pinpoint this. As I said, it's almost generational now. It comes up. It's been going on for so long, and let's talk about imported imams, because in the article there's Dr. Taj Hargay, who wrote it on the Mail on Sunday, it was the 22nd of June this year, 2025. He says that a lot of British imams and clerics are almost entirely imported from Pakistan villages, and all too often with them comes an outlook that is ignorant, ill-educated and intolerant of other faiths. He said these mullahs twist the Quran to claim God made women inferior to men and that they must be obedient to fathers, brothers and husbands. He also went on to say that we need homegrown imams here in the UK that can be properly educated in Islam and be patriotic to British values. So my question to you, Asrar, is should the UK train imams to make sure that they follow British laws and values leave Pakistan?
There's a few broad
back where it is.
generalizations there. A few broad generalizations. Number one, he's referred to all of them as coming from villages and ignorant, which is false. Some of them come from cities like Islamabad, progressive cities. Many of them are very educated. They may have qualified from Islamabad University, PhDs. Not all of them are ignorant. Secondly, he refers to these imams as being somehow the cause of the grooming gangs, when the two issues are totally unrelated.
I don't think he is. I think some of the teachings, some of the mindset that they bring, that's infiltrated to young people here in the country.
Again, it's a broad generalization, but the aspect of British values, what he suggests, what are British values? Meaning, how do we actually define those British values?
Come on, you tell me. You're the English. You're the Englishman here.
If I wouldn't be deemed as English by the far right here. Meaning, they would look at the color of my skin or the ethnic background.
No, yeah.
Yes. So, how do we actually define British values? Do we go back to the Victorian values of Britain? Do we go back to medieval values? Do we go back to Christianity? Do we go back to Protestant Christianity or Catholicism to get our moral compass? So when he talks about British values, coming from a South African, Taj Hargay is South African, he needs to
South African, Malaysian,
he needs to specify what he actually means by British values, because some of those British values may actually not be in accordance with.
I suppose he
drinking.
He would refer not to be taken on customs and values from ancestral homelands that you know.
But some of those customs and values are better than British values, like looking after old people. We do not have old people's homes. We should not have old people's homes. We look after our elders. We keep them in the home. We look after them until they die. They pass away. So we would never abandon those kind of morals, ethics.
But I suppose this is about women. He's trying to indicate that there's some type of.
He mentions women.
It's the mindset that some Muslims, not all Muslims, but some Muslims have towards women, and obviously it's that mindset that leads to.
Yes, so if he's referring to sexual abuse being a part of any cultural value, it's not true to say that any culture has sexual abuse towards women. I mean, that's not true of Pakistan as well, even though they may have aspects of what I mentioned to you of this bachabazi and other things. But to say the grooming gangs are a sole product of Pakistani culture without grooming gangs coming from within the British society, where there is a grooming gang culture as well, where there is an abuse culture, and it doesn't only exist amongst the common people. We know that the grooming gang culture exists amongst the ruling elite.
Of course they do.
So going all the way to 10 Downing Street. Remember when David Cameron was called by Tom Watson MP from Birmingham to release the file which had names of MPs who were
vaguely remembered
in 2010. So even PI from the 1970s, Paedophile Information Exchange, many of the top brass of the Labour Party were involved in PI, Paedophile Information Exchange. If the democratic process had gone through, it's just the masses don't accept paedophilia. The masses don't accept paedophilia. But if the masses did accept paedophilia, it would go through parliament. PI would have become legislation. And some of these people in the Labour Party today were involved in PI back in the 1970s. So to say it's only a Pakistani issue, I would say no. It's a issue, and then you have
Well, in these
Prince Andrew.
in these grooming gangs,
You
know,
have the Prince
there
Andrew,
were predominantly
Epstein. No, without doubt,
Pakistani.
without doubt. But as I mentioned, the Epstein files and
Asra, we could do a 10-hour podcast and cover all of those, and it still wouldn't be enough.
But what we should agree on,
there are thousands upon thousands.
What we should agree on, those the Prince Andrew is a Christian. Prince Andrew being a Christian, we do not label him, or Epstein was a Jew. We do not say.
But these men are not Muslims. They don't have the moral compass of a Muslim.
They have the biblical moral compass.
Well,
we do not.
It has failed, Asra, hasn't it?
We do not label it as Jewish or Christian grooming gangs.
Yeah.
This is what I'm getting at.
That moral compass has failed.
Similarly,
and for these men caught up in these grooming gangs, their moral compass has failed
them.
So, that this goes back to the rotten apples. You know, you don't want to let more apples into the basket to contaminate what's already there.
Yes, of course.
So you have to contain this problem, and as I said, this problem has gone on time and time.
The only
again.
way
it's not the first time that we've had Asian grooming gangs.
The only way it will be contained is strict punishment.
Okay, but we will finish off with punishment, and I have a few interesting questions to ask you about punishment. But let's continue with this British laws and values. I wanted to talk to you. Another reason that was put forward was about dangerous teachings in the UK, and I don't know how you'll feel about this, but please let me know. I'm not going to name mosques or certain leaders here in the UK, but there are a few that it has been leaked to the media that they've come up with very controversial teachings. The views don't represent mainstream Islam, but they raise serious concerns. And I know that at a mosque here in Birmingham, it was leaked to a Sunday newspaper about a sermon one Friday that was given about how to stone a woman for adultery, saying that she should be buried up to her waist to protect her modesty before being stoned. Other leakage to the media said, it was from a sermon, said that a wife must always meet her husband's sexual needs, raising fears that this could justify marital rape. More recently, there was somebody who defended child marriage. He said that girls as young as 11 can be married off by their parents without consent as long as they are virgins. Would you consider, what I've read out, do you consider these to be dangerous teachings that don't represent Islam? Or that they're taken out of context in some way?
The first report you're referring to, I do know which masjid do you mean.
Well, don't name it, because
I don't intend to name it, but that was clearly out of context, because he was giving the background of stoning in Islamic Sharia. He was giving that in context, like in the biblical laws. You have within the biblical law in the Old Testament, you have passages which today are not acted upon, but he was giving context in that regard. So the newspaper took that.
They might have, but I suppose the point that they were trying to make is that he only singled out women. Obviously, it takes two to tango. So if there's adultery takes place, what about the male?
So in Islamic law,
he never said any punishment for the male. Just singled out the woman.
As you know, in Islamic law, the man is punished also. In fact, many times the woman is let off free because of the context of, for instance, rape. Like this famous story of in the Caliph Ali's time, when the man and woman were caught, but the woman said he offered me milk to drink and I was hungry, so she was let off. So there are cases where that happens, but again, those three examples you've given, child marriage, with regard to child marriage, because the Islamophobes, the anti-Islamic crowd, tend to give citation to the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, with Aisha, who was 9 years old at the time. So they give that as an example and equate grooming gangs with that contextual marriage, which any anthropologist will tell you that a cultural norm in ancient societies where women, where Aisha herself says in Tirmidhi, it states, she says, I was married off when I was a woman. Why does she say I was a woman? Because anthropologically in those societies, girls were deemed as women once they passed puberty. So in Islamic law, once someone passes puberty, they are deemed as adults in Islamic law. How does that work today in ritual worship? For instance, the 5 daily prayers become an obligation when you pass puberty. So puberty was seen as adulthood in ancient Islamic cultures and norms. It only became a problematic issue post 1900s when the norms, cultural norms changed in the dominant culture of the West. So the marriage of Aisha was seen as problematic post 1900s. But in ancient Arabia, that objection was never raised. Even in the medieval times, that objection was never raised. But Islamic law does raise the age of consent with the norms having changed. So today, the age of consent is raised due to concerns regarding the mental maturity of young girls who may have passed the age of puberty but will not be deemed as women because of the lack of mental maturity. So the norms have changed.
Yeah.
Having said that, some of the citations from previous times in Islamic law, these citations may be mentioned in a khutbah, but I believe any imam who gives citation to these things like slavery or marriage of young women or stoning, they must give clear context when they give that lecture or sermon.
I think they do,
and many of them do. And some of them do not even mention these things. But there is...
Well, they need to be careful, though. They need to be quite clear, and they need to put things into
remember,
context. And
one thing is that when the anti-Islam force have no other arguments, they fall back onto the marriage of Aisha because they have nothing else to say.
In this case, I don't think that was actually mentioned in the in the sermon. It was about marrying off children quite young. What I was something occurred to me when you were saying that. Obviously, these are quite controversial sermons. Since the grooming gangs have come back into the media forefront, have you actually given any address or any speech?
Yes, multiple times.
Multiple times,
yes,
okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
So
because that's obviously, people don't hear about those type of...
Yes, they don't, but many of them will have seen clips of mine where I condemn those grooming gangs for the shame that they bring on the Muslim community.
Good.
And...
can you give us just a summary of that, what you actually said?
Well, I've addressed the government and said the government has failed in terms of why are they worried about racial labeling? For me, political correctness does more damage to other groups, meaning there should be no political correctness. I'll give you an example. Currently, we have the genocide in Gaza. The majority of the Jewish community support the genocide in Gaza. Mentioning that doesn't mean...
Not all of them, but...
majority.
A
majority of Jewish people are actually supporting the state of Israel. So if there is a case where there is a community, where there is a problem, that problem should be addressed. In this case, the majority of Muslims do not support the grooming gangs. We do not call for their so-called human rights. These are the so-called human rights that they refer to are humanist philosophy ideas, Western value type, atheistic, capitalist type labels, human rights. How can a rapist have human rights in that sense, in the sense that he is not punished correctly? I'm not advocating torture, but I'm saying this label human rights is misused. The thief has rights. The rapist has rights. But what type of rights? Meaning the right to not be punished. So the punishments need to be
Do you think they're too lenient?
reformed. Yes, there needs to be legislation on stricter punishment. But of course the politicians will not look into that. Why? Because the politicians are just the servants of the capitalist elite who perhaps do not want such type of punishments. Politicians are servants of their masters. And the only type of legislation that goes through is that which serves the needs of corporate capitalism in this society. So Parliament's lost its actual value. Parliament post Tony Blair, when Tony Blair done away with the House of Lords and gave law, meaning the House of Lords now is not the real breed of politicians that Britain had previously. So the real British values would be, in my view, to reinstate the aristocracy into the House of Lords. I actually believe that.
And how do you
And
do
that
you
would
do you
go
think that
against-
they would make strict? Do you think they would pass legislation, laws that would
Well,
have stricter punishments? Because
yes.
look, if you look at the current punishments, I mean, obviously the obvious one is prison, sex offenders register, probation, parole, mandatory
So sex-
therapy. No,
so
let me
the-
finish. Let
go
me
on,
finish.
go on.
Electronic monitoring,
Yeah,
limits on where they can live and work. Well, that's obviously part of the sex offenders register.
yeah.
But do you think that any of them are not really strong enough? I mean, obviously prison is
Not strong enough.
It's not a deterrent,
Remember Jamie Bulger's case?
Yeah,
One of the murderers, when he was released, he reoffended.
you did, yes.
And many of these paedophiles are dumped in our inner city areas. Here in Birmingham, you have the HMO system, where this council can fund HMOs but cannot fund to clean our rubbish, and they will dump all sorts of child abusers in inner city areas.
So within UK law, how should these Pakistani men have been punished?
Within UK law.
Within UK law.
Well, those who have taken British citizenship, but are not actually from Britain, in the sense
They were
that they're-
sentenced for their crimes here, so obviously their punishment is going to be according to that.
well, it should be life.
Life in prison.
Yes,
yeah.
life imprisonment,
Right.
minimum.
Okay.
Life imprisonment for rapists, meaning that should be the absolute minimum.
Yeah.
Life imprisonment.
Yeah.
They
yeah.
stay in prison till they die.
Yeah. What about chemical castration? You mentioned that earlier. And
Well-
it's interesting that you mentioned that earlier, because that actually came up this year, in June this year, June 2025. There was a young Chinese national. He was sentenced at Inner London Crown Court. And his defence, but I know they were trying to get a shorter prison sentence for him. Eventually, I think he got a minimum term of 24 years. They brought this, they actually, his defence said, he would volunteer to be chemically castrated in lieu of a shorter prison. Actually, the judge
Dismissed that.
They dismissed
Again,
that.
under what they refer to as human rights, and
Probably.
the broader definition of human rights, and now judges and legislators.
But do you think that's something that should be revisited?
In Britain, yes.
Yes.
In Britain, yes. Personally, I believe in execution of rapists.
Yeah, but you're not going to get that in Britain, are you?
Not today, but they can look at the previous laws from the 1950s, when execution was in British law. So there's some type of what we refer to as a history of this legislation of execution for rapists and murderers. It would save a lot of people from hassle. So, in my opinion, these Pakistani rapists, these white rapists, these black race rapists, any rapist.
No, absolutely. It's
executed.
for everyone. Absolutely. Punishment for everyone.
But Tommy Robinson would, for some reason, just focus on the Pakistani rapists.
He might do, but I'm not Tommy Robinson, and I haven't come here today because, as I started off with saying, I know that the vast majority of sex offenders in this country aren't Muslim, but I just wanted to talk about the ones that actually are, because as I said, I'm still naive, but when I read a newspaper, I expect that, and I think it's a good thing. Isn't it a good thing that I can read a newspaper and I'm actually a bit taken back that
because-
Muslims do certain thing? Surely you don't prefer me to pick up a paper and actually be complacent and say, well...
But that is because you're an educated man. But unfortunately, in this day of mass education, which causes mass illiteracy, it's an it's like a paradoxical world we live in. There's free mass education, but most people still educate themselves on social media.
Yeah, and I firmly believe that the very vast majority of Muslims are really, really good people with very good moral compasses. So that's what I've come with here today. Going back to looking at the reasons for this continual problem arranged marriages came up in Dr. Taj Hargey's article that I sent you. That was in the Sunday Mail on Sunday. He says that some critics say forced or loveless marriages, especially to cousins from abroad, can lead to hatred of women and socialization. Social isolation. Now, Dr. Hargey, he said these marriages, often to illiterate first cousins from Pakistan, have nothing to do with Islam. He says instead that they create angry men who grow up despising women. What do you think of that?
So he means
Do you think that's true?
Forced arranged marriages.
He said, well, he didn't say forced marriage, it was arranged marriages.
Well, I believe arranged marriages.
That's quite the norm in Islam.
No, of course
Arranged
not.
marriages.
Arranged marriages.
Yeah, not forced
But he
marriage.
means arranged marriages with cousins.
Yes.
First cousins.
Yeah.
There were calls for legislation in Britain to ban first cousin marriage. What I will mention with regard to first cousin marriage, there were odd occurrences of first cousin marriages in Islamic history. So, like Fatima married Ali, but Ali was the first cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But was it the common norm amongst the early generation of Muslims? The answer is no, they would marry out. I personally believe that the genetic pool and DNA of a person should be as broad as possible. Historically, Muslims have done that. So we have Turks and Kurds and Arabs and Africans and a broad range of mixed marriages. So there should be a broad genetic pool in a person. First cousin marriages being permissible does not mean they should be the norm. Secondly, it's discouraged by Imam Ghazali. Imam Ghazali and others said it should be discouraged because it can produce weaker children. That is not always the case, but if you have cousin marriages occurring again and again, this is something that I have spoken against and have not recommended to the masses and the congregation. So, Islamically speaking, even though it may be permissible, it should not be the norm. I believe people in Britain should marry from a range of cultures and races.
I think that what he's getting to here is that the people are trapped in unhappy marriages, toxic relationships.
But they cannot they cannot blame toxic marriages for child abuse. That's a very narrow reading of the situation. Because in Islam you can have 4 wives. So if a man is forced to marry his cousin,
or you can divorce them, yeah,
he can divorce her, and he can have a second wife, a third wife, and a fourth wife.
Yeah.
So those people who are in the grooming gangs clearly have a sickness that is not remedied through marriage.
So you wouldn't buy into any harmful sexual practices like these.
That does not relate to first cousin marriages, because that man can easily marry a second woman, a third woman, and a fourth woman, and divorce. They have that option. So grooming gangs are a produce of a sick mind, a sick sexual desire, which is misguided.
There's nothing to do with whether you're in an arranged marriage or anything. Yeah, I to be quite honest with you, I probably would tend to agree with you on that one. I think that has to come from something far deeper.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in Baroness Casey's report, which you've read, Islamophobia came up quite a lot, Asra. And defining Islamophobia in Britain, it's tricky business. Her review showed that some public bodies hid evidence about grooming gangs because they were afraid of being called racist. This raised a serious issue. How do we fight anti-Muslim hate without ignoring child protection? And the official definition of Islamophobia must be clear. It must stop real hate, but it must not be used to silence people who raise valid concerns. What's your definition of Islamophobia before we go any further?
So there should be a distinction between racism and Islamophobia. As I mentioned to you, there are thousands of white English Muslims within the UK and non-English white Scottish and Irish Muslims.
Yeah.
So race and Islamophobia, there should be a clear distinction. In this particular case of the grooming gangs, the association of the grooming gangs to Islam is totally invalid, meaning it's nothing to do with Islam, as I've already explained. But the government being, or the institutions, government institutions or individuals in the institutions, fearing of being labeled racist by pointing out the ethnic designation of a rapist or a groomer, is something which I see as a failure of those institutions. There should be no political correctness when it comes to dealing with
No, I agree with you.
any race.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if there's a high statistic of a particular race carrying out a particular crime, it can be pointed out that this is a social problem within that particular group,
totally agree
within
with
the social construct or community of that group.
But the people were very coy. Even the police were very coy because it's Asian grooming gangs. Whereas, Dr. Tash Hage, he went that for, he said we have to name that particular nationality because they're completely overrepresentative in that, and that's
Yes,
these
so
statistics.
like the Italian mafia is referred to as Italian, in this case they can be referred to as Pakistani grooming gangs, but again it has no link to religion.
Yeah.
To refer to it as Muslim grooming gangs, this is what I said is totally out of
So you
context.
take out the racist element. So what would you give as a simple definition of Islamophobia?
Of Islamophobia, I would say, firstly, let's go into the history of Islamophobia in the United Kingdom from 1066 to 1099. What happened in those 33 years? As an Irishman, you perhaps can tell me, when William the Conqueror, he conquers Britain, or England in that time, in 33 years, what does England carry out? It carries out the First Crusade in 1099. So within 33 years, you had the change of English society from 1066 to 1099 being converted into an Islamophobic society. And then you even had the legislation of the Saladin tax, where the British were taxed to fund wars against Saladin. Not much has changed since then. From that time until now, you had the Turk's Head pubs, where they had the picture of a Turk with brown, dark skin, even though Turks are white. And the Turk's Head pub even still exists here in Birmingham. That Islamophobia, associating black people with Islam, so this African slave trade, the association of Africans with Islam, even though many of them were not Muslims. They were African, they had their own religions. And there was a deep association of the black man with Islam also. So Islamophobia is in the undercurrent of the ruling elite, in the undercurrent of the masses, the peasant masses of the past, and now the tax-paying citizen, the modern slaves that we have. So Islamophobia is in the blood of many Westerners, whether they realize it or not.
No, I don't disagree with you, but there is a problem with coming up with
prejudice.
with the definition of it.
The definition,
Why is there a struggle? Why do people struggle to actually come up with an official definition of Islamophobia?
On the people who give legislation, they need to give clear definitions that do not lead to contradiction, do not curtail freedom of speech.
Well, they seem to be afraid. They seem to be afraid in some way.
Rushdie would be deemed an Islamophobe by me, but for some he would be a man of who needs freedom of speech. So you see the contradiction.
You love freedom of speech.
I love freedom of speech to a point. So I would deem it illegal to insult Jesus, to insult Buddha, to insult those religious figures, because the Quran clearly prohibits the prohibition of insulting an idol, because it leads to counter ignorance, where the person of another faith will insult your religion. So there needs to be demarcation of freedom of speech and hate speech, meaning the clear distinction between the two. Or criticism of a religion, distinction. For instance, I as a Muslim do not advocate idol worship, but there's a clear line between criticizing idol worship and insulting the Hindu religion.
Yeah.
Insulting Hindus to the point that they will insult Islam. There's a clear...
Yeah.
So a person has the freedom to criticize a religion, but not to the point of hate speech. So that needs that's for something for the judges and the lawmakers of this country. The judges don't make the law. The
But
problem
what
is
does that word? What
the-
does that word mean to you? Islamophobia. how? Explain it to me.
So
Let's say I never heard of that word before in my life.
incendiary speech which leads to violence against Muslims, or clear insult against those who are deemed as holy persons. So those two things would.
No, that's pretty clear. But why do you think that people are afraid? Because this was about covering up. They didn't want to be labelled anti-Muslim or
That's ignorance of the police officers to link Islam and being Muslim.
Yeah, isn't it?
It's ignorance of the police
Yeah,
officers.
it is.
If,
But I think that's we've in this country we have become just so sensitive, haven't we? So sensitive to offend somebody, but in return, thousands of children have been harmed.
well, they've not
in this
been-
particular.
This is the problem. They've not been sensitive to Muslims when it comes to terror laws and terrorism.
I know, but
So
let's stick to the subject.
No,
here.
I'll give you an example. So you have innocent people being arrested for terrorism. Yes. In the case of grooming gangs and pedophiles, if you have caught pedophiles, why are you being sensitive? You're not being sensitive with terrorists or presumed terrorists. Why the sensitivity around pedophiles? That, in my opinion, are worse than so-called terrorists or actual terrorists. A pedophile is worse because of the psychological damage.
Well, both are pretty awful. Let's not have either of them.
Yes, of course. But depending on the nature of presumed terrorists, because there are some people who are even caught for terrorism, they've not actually carried out a terrorist attack. It's presumed that this person may have done a terrorist attack.
Yeah. No, I get that. Okay. Can these grooming gangs, can they be stopped? You've done speeches, and I'm sure there's other fine scholars of your ilk will have done their bit around the country. Do you think that they can be? Do you think that this
can be
stopped?
They can be stopped with stronger legislation. They can be stopped with community cohesion, by communities acting against any grooming gang. So we've had restaurant owners, taxi drivers, all these people involved within the grooming gangs. If this type of behavior is observed, where there are young girls who are vulnerable, like someone was telling me recently, one of the students of knowledge, he was standing on Soho Road here in Birmingham at late night, and he saw a vulnerable young girl waiting for a bus.
Yeah.
And some people approached her and attempted to flirt with her. Men, grown men. The student intervened and said, leave her alone. Now, that type of action is needed, where if we observe this type of behavior, it should be totally
That was one of my
unacceptable.
questions. What can ordinary Muslims do to stop this abuse?
Intervene.
Yeah, they can.
Intervene.
Yeah, obviously, the actions of that young man saved that young girl
Yes,
from potential harm.
and this has happened many times. So we as Muslims, this is our responsibility, because I believe we Muslims have the potential to raise broken Britain in many ways.
Yeah.
Broken Britain, we have the potential because we have the moral guidelines. So we need to lead the way as a role model society, Muslims. And starting with these grooming gangs, if there are any grooming gangs still around, extant in our communities, direct action should be taken against those groomers, against anyone who is abusing.
But look, you're not afraid to address really contentious social issues. You're not afraid to give really, to go around the country giving speeches. You tackle problems head on. But when I was writing my first book on Islam, I was told about a lot of imams. I was told by imams that they're sometimes curtailed what they say in mosques, that there are some elders in mosques that they don't like, anything too contentious. They don't like talking about anything that would refer to sex and so on and so forth. Do you think that's right or wrong? Do you think that within
No,
context that you should address issues
I don't
head
think,
on?
I don't think there's a curtailing of speech in the mosques. Any imams who failed in addressing these issues, it's their own personal choice. The elders do not actually stop you from talking about sex or these type of social issues. I've never had any of those type of prohibitions from the mosque committees or mosque management.
Because one of the things that Dr. Taj Hargay said in that newspaper article that he wrote, he says that there will never be a real solution until we confront the twisted version of Islam that men caught up in these grooming gangs follow. He said this version is spread from the pulpit and it poisons minds. He said that Muslims in Britain must tackle the 3 M's, the 3 M's being mullahs, mosques and madrasas, which collectively brainwash young men of Pakistani heritage into believing that their young female victims are no better than white trash, easy meat for the appetites of the superior Muslim male. That's very strong language.
Well, his association with that attitude towards white women, blaming it on the pulpit is wrong. I'll give you an example. Have you ever read Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses?
No, I haven't.
I have read it. Do you know how many references he makes to white women as being therefore
Tell me.
sexually using white women? He one of the main characters even has a wet dream with the Queen Elizabeth II. He talks about, in Satanic Verses, he talks about white women are therefore, and throwing aside multiple times within the Satanic Verses. Now my question to Hagi is that Rushdie has the same background as these groomers, but he's not a Muslim. Rushdie has the same racial background. He's from Pakistan, India, that region.
India,
yes.
Yeah.
So what is Rushdie's inspiration for treating white women like that? I believe that has an element of post-colonial mindset. It's nothing to do with Islamic teachings. So that's my response to Hagi.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about this collectively brainwashing young men of
That's
Pakistani
absurd,
heritage?
meaning
You don't think that's true?
They're not brainwashed in the mosques. He needs to furnish that with evidence and proof. I believe Hagi is feeling vindictive because he's marginalized by the mainstream Muslim community because of his views on LGBT.
Well, that's another subject for another day.
Yes.
I suppose I brought that up because how can these grooming gangs ever be stopped? Because as I continue to say,
As I said,
gone on for a long time.
Intervention from us.
Are we going to be
from
sitting here in 10 years' time and there'll be a new wave of them?
Even if there is, we will continue intervening when possible. There's a concept in Islam known as an-nahi anil munkar, prohibition of the bad and evil. We will continue speaking against evil, and this is one of the evils, and we will continue warning young men and other men regarding these evils and vices.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say on
No.
this? Do you think that those questions have been fair, or do you think that any of them,
Remember, I wanted to mention
for
this.
my learning curve?
Jimmy Savile, I have to mention Jimmy Savile. He was a Catholic. He met the Pope. He was openly believing in God, but it was never a Catholic crime. What
No,
he did.
absolutely not.
Yes.
No.
And it will never be labeled a Catholic crime. Prince Andrew is a Protestant. It will never be. I don't know the payment they gave out, the royal family, but Epstein was a Jew, and these grooming gangs are Muslim, and
Well, not all of them, but these.
these particular
Yeah.
grooming gangs, and many of the rapists are atheists. Brady was an atheist. Ian Brady convinced Myra Hindley of atheism,
Yeah.
and Rose West and Fred West, we do not know what religion they had. The point being, these are human crimes like murder, like theft,
Yeah.
and to label it with any religion or no religion, meaning you cannot refer to the atheist grooming gangs as atheist grooming gangs.
Yeah.
and ask Richard Dawkins how to resolve the problem.
But this country definitely needs more strong leadership,
Robust leadership.
like from good men like yourself, because all the students, the thousands of students that you teach, none of them will end up in this boat, will they?
Hopefully never.
No, well, they haven't so far.
And with the leadership you mentioned, Parliament makes legislation. If we have the lowest common...
If there was one piece of legislation that you would change, what would you change?
The lowest common denominator today is becoming the parliamentarian. And the lowest common denominator is making legislation. So the legislation I would make is death, execution of rapists and murderers. I would have that.
That's what you would do.
Yes.
Sheikh Asrar Rashid, it's always a pleasure to come to Birmingham. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope we talk soon again. But
Inshallah.
for today, thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
Thank you.